It's really important to understand what's going on in the broader context of the world when you're seeing this message received by these people. Otherwise, a lot of the time, if we're outside of the historical context, we'll end up looking at scripture like we're the audience. And there is a certain extent where, of course, like we're part of the capital C church, right? So we are the intended audience, but we were not the original intended audience, right? 2,000 years ago, Jesus was not speaking to you in a crowd of people, right? He was speaking to a unique group of people that were from a unique culture. He was using some of their references and some things they understood, right? So I always say right now, if you start talking about the Matrix, there's a group of people in this room that have no idea what I'm talking about right now, right? So if you just understood the reference, you're old, okay? Right? It hurts because I don't feel old, but if I talk about the Matrix and Keanu Reeves and being plugged into the Matrix, there's a group over here that's gonna start looking at me like I'm speaking Mandarin to them. And they might actually know Mandarin more than they know the Matrix. So that's what's happening here. Jesus is speaking to a specific historical context. He's gonna be using their culture and their understanding in order to preach a message to them, right? And then we're gonna do some sermon analysis. So we're gonna gain a general understanding of the Sermon on the Mount in light of the historical context of the book of Matthew. So this is not gonna be a line by line necessarily Bible study of the Sermon on the Mount or the book of Matthew. So I'm really, really sorry if you came here to do that. It's not going to be exactly what happens. But I do think it'll be really helpful, and hopefully this will help unlock a lot of the New Testament for people, So in order to talk about the Sermon on the Mount, I wanna start with the most natural person to start talking about first, and that is our friend Alexander the Great. So raise your hand if you expected that one. Okay, so we pick up our story about 300 BC or so, okay? So about 300 years before the birth of Jesus Christ, with our friend Alexander the Great, who is half Greek and half Macedonian, but he sees himself as completely Greek, okay? Macedonian is Eastern European, okay? So his father is Eastern European and starts building this massive empire. His name is Philip. And then Alexander is born to his father and a Greek woman. And he's like, I'm Greek and I'm going to take over the world using this empire that my father had built. And Alexander actually does. He does this whole thing and he takes over the world, essentially. If you look at this map, this is a map of essentially what we would consider most of the modern world at the time, okay? So we have Egypt, right? Everyone knows that place, correct? And then we have Europe up top. So if you see Italy and Rome, he didn't touch that place, but all the Greek areas he has taken over. And then he moves into what's now modern day Turkey. So you see Ephesus right on the coast, right up there where it says 333, Ephesus. That's where Ephesus is. So the book of Ephesus is written in that area. And then obviously he goes through Israel to Egypt and then out into what is considered Persia at the time, okay? So the reason this is important is because this is going to create the foundational culture for what's gonna be taking place in the time of Jesus. So this time period is known as the intertestamental period. Some people call it the silent period. I don't think that's a very good name for it, okay? And the reason why is because God was working during this time period. Alexander the Great fulfills like a bunch of Old Testament prophecies. It's absolutely insane. So one prophecy that he fulfills, which is my favorite one, is it says at one point that the dust of Tyre would be used to destroy it. And so what he does is Alexander comes down to Tyre and Sidon, and at this point there's a city called Old Tyre, which is on the actual peninsula. It's over by Ephesus kind of, right? And what they've done is they're being really smart, and they have ships and Alexander does not, okay? And so what they do is they retreat all their people to this island right off the coast, okay? So what does Alexander do? He razes the old city, he takes the dirt from the old city, he builds a land bridge over months and months and months, and attacks an island with a land bridge, and it's connected permanently now. And the new city of Tyre and the old city of Tyre are right next to each other on a map. You actually can't see an island anymore because Alexander created a land bridge out of the dust of Tyre and fulfills an Old Testament prophecy. Pretty cool, right? So Alexander is going to be doing all this crazy stuff, and that's where we see him come to Jerusalem, okay? And then this is a really, really important part when we're talking about the silent period in biblical prophecy, because this is why I call it the intertestamental period instead. Okay, so in the book of Daniel, we have Daniel 7 and Daniel 8. Daniel has these two visions. And in Daniel 7, he said, in a vision at night, I looked. So this is the middle part right here. In a vision at night, I looked, and there before me were 4 winds of heaven churning up the great sea. 4 great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea. The first was like a lion, and it had the wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being, and the mind of a human was given to it. And there before me was a second beast which looked like a bear, and it was raised up on one of its sides. And it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, get up and eat your fill of flesh. After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard, and on its back it had 4 wings, like those of a bird. The beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. So that's our one prophecy, and that beast looks like a leopard. So if you look on this, really hidden in the background, you see that leopard with the wings, right? So these are the depictions of those beasts. You have the bear, the lion, and then eventually we'll have the dragon, which we're not gonna touch on tonight. And then he has this other prophecy in Daniel 8, and he said, I'm going to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath, because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end. The 2-horned ram that you saw represents the kingdom of Media and Persia. So where does Alexander go after Jerusalem? He goes to Egypt, and then he goes to Persia, right? And then the shaggy goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn between its eyes is the first king. The 4 horns that replaced the one that was broken off represented 4 kingdoms that will emerge from his nation, but will not have the same, what's that last word? Power. Cool. So what's gonna happen is Alexander, there's a story that Josephus writes that Alexander the Great goes into the city of Jerusalem. And the priest the day before has a dream that this is gonna happen. And in the dream, he goes and he meets this man at the gates. Think about this. Alexander's just been in Tyre, right? What does he do there? He is so petty that he doesn't just leave them there. He creates a land bridge, throws it into the water, right? And then goes and destroys this whole city and kills everyone there. So in Jerusalem, guess what? These people don't have a great history of surviving stuff like this, right? If they've been exiled by the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Persians, not in Jerusalem, but in the northern kingdom. So the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, they do not have a great history with people just leaving them be. What Alexander does is he pulls up, and the priest goes and meets him outside the city gates. And according to Josephus, he takes a knee and says, "Hail the God of the Israelites." And in the dream, the night before, Alexander had seen the high priest in a dream. And the high priest brings the scroll of Daniel to Alexander the Great. He unrolls it and shows him these prophecies and said, "You're the Greek and you're gonna go conquer the Persians." And Alexander believed that. He actually, according to this tradition, he gives homage to Yahweh, right? And then leaves and actually goes and does what it says in the prophetic word. But what also happens in the prophetic word, if you guys remember, is we have the 4 horns and then we have the 4 heads of the leopard. And guess what happens to Alexander's empire when he dies? It divides into 4 kingdoms. Oh, isn't this crazy? Like, this is all recorded that this was written hundreds of years before these events happened, okay? And so we have these 4 kingdoms, and this is where it gets really, really important for laying the foundation in Jesus' time. So we have two really, really important kingdoms when it comes to Israel. We have the Ptolemaic Empire, which is the yellow. Okay, so initially, the Ptolemaic Greeks, led by one of the generals of Alexander, they took over the ruling area of Israel, and they left the people completely alone. They said, do whatever you want, have your own land, have your own customs, rule yourself. We're totally good. We just really want the area, right? And then you had the Seleucid Empire, which is red, which obviously looks a lot bigger, right? So they took over a lot of the former parts of Persia, had a very large military, and they will continually try to take over this area of Israel. And they actually end up succeeding. So we're going to look at another timeline. So by 200 BC, the Seleucids take control. So Antiochus III defeats the Ptolemies, right? So the other Greeks in the Battle of Panium. And Judea now belongs to the Seleucid Empire that's based out of Syria. So everything starts to change when the Seleucids take over, especially when Antiochus III dies. His son, Antiochus IV, takes over. And the crisis, Antiochus, or Antiochus Epiphanes, tries to force Greek culture on the Jews. He bans Jewish practices, he desecrates the temple, and sets up the altar as an altar to Zeus. Okay, so if you know anything about Jewish worship, they are unhappy about this. Okay? And so what happens is very natural. It's called the Maccabean Revolt. So we don't have this book of the Bible typically in our Bibles because we are not Catholic or Greek Orthodox, right? Except for Misty. Misty is Catholic, so she's masquerading as a Protestant, but we all know. No, I'm just kidding. No, I joke and say I'm like 3/4 of the way Catholic because I like reading these books. I think they're really interesting. So the book of First Maccabees actually details what's called the Maccabean Revolt with Judas Maccabee taking, whoa, Lord, is that you? Hello. Okay, there we go. Are we good now? Yeah. Thank you. But Judas Maccabee, Matthias is the first, or Mattathias is the first, and his son Judas Maccabeus. They rebel against the Seleucids in 164 BC. They recapture and they cleanse the temple, and this is why we celebrate Hanukkah. So if you're ever wondering why Jewish people do that, that's why. We celebrate Hanukkah because there was an enormous victory over the Seleucid Empire. This is a for sure David and Goliath story, right? If you go, let's go look at the map, right? This is the area of Israel, right? That dot is too big. You know what I mean? Like that dot represents too many people. And they defeated that whole red empire that had stretched all the way down to them. So, I mean, this is an absolutely miraculous thing. What's even more miraculous is that the Seleucids don't come back. So they actually pretty much leave them be, and they're able to rule themselves. And so in 142 BC, after a 20-year civil war with the Seleucid Empire, the Jewish people finally achieve independence. They're able to run their own nation once more. The Jews achieve full independence. The Hasmonean dynasty, which is the Maccabean family, begins ruling as both kings and high priests. And everything's happy, and we don't have to worry about anything ever again. See you guys later. No, so that would be great if that was the end of the story, right? And then everything, so what I would like to be my ideal is, okay, then everything goes well, and then the Romans are just so mean, and they come in, and they ruin everything, right? Is what we'd like to believe. But man, the Hasmonean dynasty is like actually awful. They're just the worst kind of people. So what they do is they consolidate the high priesthood with the king of Israel. So they literally take over and they go, okay, cool. Like now I'm the high priest and I'm the king. There's two problems with this. One is they're not from a Davidic line. They're actually from a Levitical line. And they're not from the Levitical line where you get to choose a high priest from them. So like nothing actually fits at all. Very bad, very, very bad. And this all culminates with another Alexander, which is super fun, right? It's a guy named Alexander Jannaeus. So he rules from 103 to 76 BC in Israel. He strongly sided with the Sadducees. So we get these Pharisees and Sadducees that start to emerge in this time period. So if you ever wonder where they come from, because they're not in the Old Testament, right? Have you ever read the New Testament and gone, where the heck are these Pharisees and Sadducees? It's really because of the Greeks. Because the Pharisees come up and they say, no, there's a spiritual world, right? And we participate in it, and there's angels, and there's demons, and there's resurrection of the dead. And we take the original 5 books of the law, but we also take the prophets into account, and we see Daniel, and we have dreams and visions and all these stuff. And the Sadducees go, absolutely not. The first 5 books, we only take the Pentateuch into account. There is no spiritual world. There's no resurrection of the dead. There's no angels and demons, which I didn't even know was a thing. I don't know if you guys knew that. Did anyone else know that? I had no idea that somebody could have that worldview in this time period. Because I'm like, at least now you can be an atheist because you're like science, right? You're like, well, chemistry explains something. And I even think that's ridiculous. But still, like at this point in time, they don't know why anything's happening. And they're essentially like practical atheists as Sadducees. So they're just kind of culturally, these people are culturally Israelite, Jewish, Greeks. It's kind of this weird mix. But they're already here at 103 BC. So when the apostles are interacting with these people in Acts, right, they've been around for a really, really long time and they're institutionalized. So this guy, Alexander Jannaeus, he ruled from 103 to 76, and he strongly sided with the Sadducees. If I say that about a king, what does that make the Sadducees sound like? He strongly sided with the Sadducees. That's not a rhetorical question. Does it make him sound religious? What does it make him sound like? What? Political. Whoa, there we go. So this is really odd, right? Because we have the Sadducees. They're not necessarily a religious group at this time. They are, but they're much more a political group. And you know what's really weird is, guess who they're opposing? The Pharisees, who are actually another political group within Israel. And then we have the Zealots, who are kind of this other political group. So isn't this really interesting? Now, I think sometimes, and I used to be a person who read the New Testament this way, and I think this is true about some Pharisees. I would think, oh man, they're just doing their best. Like I get it, it's the Roman Empire, and they're trying to dig their heels in. But there were Pharisees way before the Roman Empire was around. Right? There were Sadducees way before the Roman Empire was around, before Roman influence. And they were essentially fighting for control over the political mind of Israel. And that came with religious affiliation. But it's always going to be really, really good to keep it in mind when we're dealing with Pharisees in the New Testament. We are not exclusively dealing with I think sometimes, again, in our mind, we either associate them with a really mean person or like a really weird lead pastor of a church, right? We're not. We're dealing with like the head of of a political party in an area that's also religiously affiliated. And they've been trained to associate religion and politics with one another, right? So isn't this an interesting culture? Doesn't it sound similar to some other ones? Okay, cool. So he strongly sided with the Sadducees, and the conflict turned into open civil war from 93 to 87 BC. So remember, in BC, time moves backwards because we're trying to get down to 0, right? So from 93 to 87, 6 years, we had open civil war in Israel between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Pharisees being led by Pharisaical leaders, Sadducees being led by Alexander Jannaeus. What happened? Tensions boiled over during a festival when the people, backed by the Pharisees, pelted him with citrons, like little oranges, for his actions as high priest. So he's supposed to be the high priest. He's supposed to be officiating a ceremony called Sukkot, or the Feast of Booths. And he pours water on his feet instead of, I know I pronounced that wrong, right? It's terrible. But Feast of Booths is why we say it that way in English, right? Yeah, Sukkot, yeah. But yeah, I mean, and so he's supposed to pour water on the altar as a ceremonial. It's actually following oral law and tradition, which is what the Pharisees did. And instead of pouring water on the altar during the ceremony in front of a crowd of 6,000 people, he pours water on his own feet. Okay? So he's basically saying, like, you Pharisees suck to everybody. So they got super mad and start throwing stuff at him. And Janneus responds by ordering his troops to massacre worshipers in the temple. Yeah, awful, right? This sparked a full rebellion. The Pharisees even invited a foreign Seleucid king. So remember the Seleucids, we just got free from them just a little while. I know, thank you. Yeah, he had that. What the heck is going on? Okay, yeah, they invite a Seleucid king, Demetrius III, to help them fight him. After regaining the upper hand, Janneus crucified 800 Pharisees in Jerusalem while he feasted and watched their families executed in front of them, according to Josephus. Thousands more fled or were killed. Okay, so this is 90 years before Jesus is born, if that, 76 BC, you know. So you have a political leader who's combined the religion of Israel and the kingship of Israel that is now taking the other side and crucifying 800 Pharisees. So, you know, they didn't need the Romans. I'm just telling you right now, they didn't need the Romans to crucify anybody. They could do it themselves, right? So in the story goes, he's actually sitting with his concubines, which you're not really supposed to have, right? He's sitting with his concubines, feasting, watching their families murdered in front of them, and they're dying on these crosses. And this brutal episode is one of the darkest moments in Hasmonean history. The war by the end, toward the end of his reign, the war only ended toward the end of his reign when he made a partial compromise, helped by his wife Salome Alexandra, who later ruled and favored the Pharisees. So we have Salome that comes in, and then Salome has two sons. She has one son named Hyrcanus II. So in 63 BC, Rome arrives because of one of the Hasmoneans, Hyrcanus II. So what Salome's sons did is they get into a fight with each other. So Hyrcanus is one of her sons. They both go to Rome for Daddy Rome to come help. Isn't that crazy? So guess what didn't happen? Rome didn't invade. Rome was invited. So the two kings of the Hasmonean dynasty go to Rome and they fight for Rome to back one of them. And Hyrcanus II is seen as weaker than his brother. And so Rome backs the weaker one because they're like, he'll never overthrow us. He's a wuss. Okay? So Hyrcanus II comes back. Pompey the Great captures Jerusalem. There's even a story about Pompey the Great, who's one of the generals of Rome. He actually goes into the temple. So now our great Hasmonean leaders that started with a line of Judas Maccabee has now invited the Romans in, and not only that, brought them into our temple. The temple we purified from Zeus now has a Gentile that worships Roman gods inside of it. And Jerusalem and Israel becomes a Roman client state. In 37 BC, there's a rebellion, and Herod the Great goes, and he's one of the Hyrcanus's generals. He goes to Rome, asks them to come help, comes back, and he is installed as king of the Israelites. And Herod the Great takes over rule of Jerusalem and continues to have Jerusalem as a client state. He rules until 4 BC, and he rebuilds the temple. So this is like probably my favorite part of this whole story is the temple that they're walking in is built by Herod the Great. And the reason he does it is because he wants to be awesome. So he actually expands Solomon's temple. So he almost doubles the size of Solomon's temple and builds it very ornately. The Second Temple period, I don't know if you guys remember in the Bible, but when they rebuild the temple, some of the people who had seen it before start crying because it's so awful. The footprint's way smaller. It's not ornate. They're just not wealthy anymore, right? Like they don't have the riches. And Herod essentially sees to it that this is one of the great wonders of the ancient world. What's really funny about that is everyone hated him anyway. So think about how bad you have to be for Jewish people to hate you when you make their temple awesome, right? It's like you got to be pretty awful. And he was. So he was a brutal king. He was terrible. And the craziest part is he wasn't even ethnically Jewish. So on here it says he was an Idumean king. He was from Edom. So his father was Edomite and his mother was Samaritan. And what happened with Hyrcanus and with the Hasmoneans is they expanded the empire of Israel. And when they did that, they would force people to convert to Judaism. And so they believe that Herod is in a family that was a forced convert to Judaism and then somehow gains power. So by the time of Jesus, we have a king that's not from the Davidic line, that's not even Jewish, right? We have a state that's ruling us from Rome that didn't invade. They didn't have to invade. They were invited in by the people, by the rulers. And we have a culture that's on a knife's edge because we have Pharisees that are trying to preserve something, but they're trying to do it in a way that's political, that's religious, that's rule-based, that's fear-based. And then we have Sadducees who are essentially going, hey, it's progress. Like, we got to move with the world. We got to adjust to the times, right? And I love this quote. It's one of my favorite quotes. Nostalgia is history after a few drinks. And so it's really funny because at the time of Jesus, what do you think these people are waiting on? They're waiting on a Maccabean revolt. They want the Hasmonean dynasty back, right? And so the context that the Sermon on the Mount is happening in, it's happening in a place where they are wanting Judas Maccabeus to be their hero once more. They're wanting to take the foreign leaders out of the temple. They're wanting to install a new dynasty and have a new king from the Davidic line. And they're essentially wanting the order to go back to how it was and to see the greatness of Israel regained through military rule. Right? So pretty fascinating. And then we have this issue of the kingdom, right? So Jesus is gonna start talking about the kingdom. And so what are Jewish people seeing at this point in time when they're seeing the kingdom? Right? They're seeing the temple cleanse. They're seeing a military. They're seeing all these things. What are Romans seeing? Well, they're seeing Caesar, right? And so we're gonna talk a little bit real quick about Roman and Greek culture. I got through that so fast. Does anyone have any questions before we go? I'm just so proud of myself right now. I thought this could take like an hour and a half. This could take, it's like 40 some minutes, 30 minutes. Anyone have any questions before we move on? That's awesome, wow. Look at this guy. Okay, so we're gonna have these images of the kingdom. And this is gonna be really, really important because when I say certain things, they are going to sound differently to everyone, okay? So a lot of the times, so perception is not reality, right? In terms of, I can perceive that gravity doesn't exist, and if I jump off a building, gravity will be enacted upon me, and I will die or be maimed for life. And so that would be bad. But at a certain point, if I say, hey guys, can you picture a dog for me? Right, okay. So for a show of hands, who pictured a dog? What kind of dog did you picture, Missy Meeker? A husky. Who else thought of husky? No one. You're weird. Okay, next. Who thought of a dog? Okay. Wow. Not what I thought, but I like it. That says something about you, I think. It's great. A beagle. So we have a husky, we got a beagle. Anybody else? He's a black Springer Spaniel. Excellent. Okay. So we have three people who just thought of a dog, but they thought of three different dogs. So this is going to be Jesus' issue. because he's about to start talking about the kingdom. Imagine that, okay? So you talk about the kingdom to a Pharisee, that means one thing. You talk about a kingdom to a Sadducee, that means one thing. You talk about a kingdom to a zealot, that means another thing. To a Greek, that means one thing. To a Roman, that means another thing. The Romans are actually redefining kingdom as we speak while we're reading this story, because they went from having a Senate and a representative, like kind of democratic republic type thing, weird iteration, to going to a dictatorship, and then from going to a dictatorship to a monarchy, and then just murdering everyone every 5 seconds, which is, super fun. If you ever, the first couple kings of Rome are just, great story, excellent story. But so we're gonna be dealing with a lot of problems within the Sermon on the Mount, because we're really gonna have to know, what's a kingdom mean, okay? A couple things that are gonna really, really hurt Greeks and Romans specifically. I think we just talked about a lot of things that are gonna hang up with the Jewish people that are really our initial intended audience. But Jesus is also gonna preach a very similar sermon in Luke called the Sermon on the Plain. And this is specifically written, the book of Luke is specifically written to communicate to Romans and Greeks. And so Luke is going to kind of cherry pick this sermon in order to speak to his intended audience. And these are gonna be some characteristics of Roman and Greek culture that are really gonna start to have an issue and bump up against the gospel. So I titled this slide, Can You See It? So the Greeks, they have a lot of values that go along with their culture. One is arete, right? I do know Greek, so we're good. So arete, right? So we have this thing, it's excellence, superiority, and being the best. That's Greek culture, baby. Philotimia, love of public honor and recognition. We love that in Greek culture. Time, personal honor and status. Kalos kagathos, the ideal of the beautiful and good man, right? We can't just have a good man, he's gotta be beautiful, okay? Think of Achilles or, every guy from Troy, okay? No, I'm just kidding. But, if we think of Brad Pitt and Achilles, as Achilles, that is a Greek man right there. He's a man willing to fight, but he's looking for public honor. He's not gonna be disrespected. There's stories of the Greek gods where they were literally slighted of their honor, and they go and massacre a whole bunch of people, and they're cheering the god on, not the people, right? This is completely foreign. We have Christian brains, so I'm gonna ask you just to deprogram for a second, because we would never ever think this way. But you have Hercules. Hercules in the story, it's not the Disney movie, okay? The real story of Hercules gets to a crossroad, and he gets to choose a life of humility or a life of notoriety, and he chooses the life of notoriety, and everybody loves Hercules in Greek culture. Okay, so the stories of their heroes are representing their ideals. They don't have heroes that choose humility. They don't have heroes that choose kindness. They don't have heroes that show mercy. They have heroes that show strength, that want public honor and recognition, personal honor and status. And if we're really being honest, they want heroes who can sleep with whoever they want. That's there we go with Greek culture. Romans are a little bit more stoic than the Greeks. So their key values are going to be virtus, manly, courage, strength, boldness in battle, dignitas, personal worth, prestige, and public standing, gravitas, stern self-importance and seriousness. And they're an honor and shame-based culture. Never let yourself be publicly shamed. And so what's really interesting about the Roman culture is remember I talked about going from the republic to the dictatorship, and then from the dictatorship to the monarchy, right? And so what's gonna happen is we have this guy named Julius Caesar who ends up campaigning to be the dictator of Rome while the republic is still in existence. He only gets to be dictator for about 6 months, and then they all kill him, which is super fun, great play. But what happens is Julius Caesar, he goes on a campaign against the Gauls and the Celts. So basically anyone who wasn't from Rome in the north was considered a Celt. And in these stories of Julius Caesar going and defeating the Celts, he's killing 80,000 people, men, women, and children in one day. He's killing 200,000 people in one day in his stories. And even if this is an embellishment, it's not like this is happening and people are like, can you believe what he did? He is doing this stuff, and then they're posting it all over the Roman Empire as propaganda for him becoming the ruler of Rome. Could you imagine that if Donald Trump was like, I killed 50,000 people in one day, loved it, you know? That we would be like, this is insane. And the people there were like, yeah, let's vote for it. Let's have him do that, you know? Yes, that is a rabbit. Thank you, Misty. So it's completely countercultural to what we're doing. But think about the Roman mindset. We're about to read the Sermon on the Mount. But think about the Roman mindset reading this, of the leader that just massacres men, women, and children. That's the one we want. We don't want the one that shows mercy. We don't want the one that shows kindness. We don't want the one that spreads some nice news to the rest of the world. We want to be Romans. We want to feel superior to everybody else. We want to take over the entire world, and it's going to be a lot of fun doing it. Right? There we go. So, without further ado, I'm going to read the Sermon on the Mount. We're finally to the text. Do you guys feel like you're in the right seat? Max just got here, so he doesn't know anything right now, but it's okay. It'll be fun. I'm actually going to read out of a different translation than you're used to. So what I want you to do is not read. And I'm going to read completely through Matthew 5 through 7. It's going to be okay. It's not very long, which is crazy. And what I want you to do is instead of trying to take notes or find principles or anything like that, I want you to think of what it's like to live in a world like this, right? So if you can choose your seat. You can choose to be a Jewish person that's gone through the civil wars. You know, if you're a descendant of a Pharisee, your grandfather might have been crucified in a civil war. You know, you can choose to be a Greek or a Roman, you know. But find your place, find your seat, and we're just going to read through this. And I'm also going to read through a translation that you're probably not really used to. And the reason why is because I think sometimes familiarity makes us dumb, right? It's like we read through the same stuff and it just feels the same. This was meant to be an emotional thing. People would not have listened to this and thought to themselves like, oh, cool, like the great takeaways. They would have heard this and it would have revolutionized their lives, okay? But when he saw the crowds, he went up on a mountain, and when he was seated, his disciples came to him. And having opened his mouth, he was teaching them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, because theirs is the reign of the heavens. Blessed are those who mourn, because they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, because they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, because they shall be filled. Blessed are the compassionate, because they shall obtain compassion. Blessed are the clean in heart, because they shall see Elohim. Blessed are the peacemakers, because they shall be called the sons of Elohim. Blessed are those persecuted for righteousness' sake, because theirs is the reign of the heavens. Blessed are you when they reproach and persecute you and falsely say every wicked word against you for my sake. Rejoice and be glad, because your reward is in the heavens and great. For in this way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt becomes tasteless, how shall it be seasoned? For it's no longer of any use, but to be thrown out and be trodden down by men. You are the light of the world. It's impossible for a city to be hidden on a mountain. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it shines to all those in the house. Let your light so shine before men, so that they see your good works and praise your Father who's in heaven. Do not think that I came to destroy the Torah or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to complete. For truly I say to you, till the heaven and earth pass away, one yod or one tittle shall not by any means pass from the Torah till all be done. Whoever then breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches men, so shall be called least in the reign of the heavens. But whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the reign of the heavens. For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall by no means enter into the reign of the heavens. You heard it said, to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that whoever is wroth with his brother without a cause shall be liable to judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Rakah, shall be liable to the Sanhedrin. But whoever says, you fool, shall be liable to the fire of Gehenna. If then you bring your gift to the slaughter place, and there remember that your brother holds whatever against you, leave your gift there before the slaughter place and go. First make peace with your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Be well-minded with your opponent promptly, while you are on the way with him, lest your opponent deliver you to the judge, and the judge to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. Truly I say to you, you shall by no means get out of there until you've paid the last quadrans. You heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you, everyone looking at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out and throw it away from you. For it's better for you that one of your members perish than for your entire body be thrown into Gehenna. And if your right eye causes you to stumble, right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away from you. For it's better for you that for one of your members perish than for your entire body to be thrown into Gehenna. And it has been said, whoever puts away his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you, whoever puts away his wife, except for the matter of adultery, makes her commit adultery. And whoever marries a woman who has been put away commits adultery. Again, you hear that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths as to Yahweh. But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by the heaven or by neither by the heaven, because it's Elohim's throne, nor by the earth, for it's his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great sovereign. Nor swear by your head, because you are not able to make one hair white or black. But let your word, yes, be yes, and your no be no. And what goes beyond these is from the wicked one. You heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the wicked. But whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. And he who wishes to sue you and take away your inner garment, let him have your outer garment as well. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks of you, and from him who wishes to borrow from you, and do not turn away. You heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those cursing you, do good to those hating you, and pray for those insulting you and persecuting you, so that you become sons of your Father in heavens. Because he makes his sun rise on the wicked and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. For if you love those loving you, what reward do you have? Are the tax collectors not doing the same? And if you greet your brothers only, what do you do more than any others? Are the tax collectors not doing so too? Therefore, be perfect as your Father in the heavens is perfect. Beware of doing your kinds of deeds before men. Beware of doing your kind deeds before men, in order to be seen by them. Otherwise, you have no reward from your Father in the heavens. Thus, when you do a kind deed, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do, in the congregations and in the streets, to be praised by men. Truly, I say to you, they have their reward. But when you do a kind deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your kind deed shall be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret shall himself reward you openly. And when you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray, standing in the congregations and on the corners of the streets to be seen by men. Truly, I say to you, they have their reward. But you, when you pray, go into your room, having shut your door, pray to your Father who's in the secret place. And your Father who sees in secret shall reward you openly. And when praying, do not keep on babbling like the nations, for they think that they shall be heard for their many words. Therefore, do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask. This then is the way you should pray. Our Father, who's in the heavens, let your name be set apart. Let your reign come. Let your desire be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And do not lead us into trial, but deliver us from the wicked one. Because yours is the reign and the power and the esteem forever. Amen. For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father shall also forgive you. But if you do not forgive men their trespasses, neither shall your Father forgive their trespasses. And when you fast, do not be sad-faced like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces so that they appear to be fasting to men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward. But you, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, so that you do not appear to men to be fasting, but to your Father who's in the secret place. And your Father who sees in secret shall reward you openly. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroy, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart shall be also. The lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, all your body shall be enlightened. But if your eye is evil, all your body shall be darkened. If then the light that is within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one is able to serve two masters, for either he shall hate the one and love the other, or else shall cleave to one and despise the other. You are not able to serve Elohim and Mammon. Because of this, I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you shall eat or drink, or about your body, or what you shall put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the heaven, for they neither sow nor reap nor gather in storehouses, yet your heavenly Father does feed them. Are you not worth more than they? And which of you, by worrying, is able to add 1 cubit to his lifespan? So why do you worry about clothing? Note well the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. And I say to you, even Solomon, it's in Hebrew, even Solomon in all his esteem was not dressed like one of these. But if Elohim so clothes the grass of the field, which exists today and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, how much more you, O you of little belief? Do not worry then, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For all these nations seek for, and your heavenly Father knows what you need, all these. But seek first the reign of Elohim and his righteousness, and all of these shall be added to you. Do not then worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow shall have its own worries. Each day has enough evil of itself. Do not judge, lest you be judged. For with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged. And with that same measure you use, it shall be measured to you. And why do you look at the splinter in your brother's eye, but did not notice the plank in your own eye? Or how is it that you say to your brother, let me remove the splinter of your eye and not see a plank in your own eye? Hypocrite, first remove the plank from your own eye, and then you shall see clearly to remove the splinter out of your brother's eye. Do not give what is set apart to the dogs, nor throw your pearls before the pigs, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you into pieces. Ask, and it shall be given to you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and him who knocks it shall be open. Or is there a man among you, if his son asks for bread, shall give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, shall give him a snake? If you then, being wicked, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more shall your Father, who's in the heavens, give what is good to those who ask him? Therefore, whatever you wish men to do to you, do also to them, for this is the Torah and the prophets. Enter in through the narrow gate, because the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter through it. Because the gate is narrow and the way is hard pressed, which leads to life, there are few who find it. But beware of the false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are savage wolves. By their fruits you shall know them. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? So every good tree yields good fruit, but a rotten tree yields wicked fruit. A good tree is unable to yield wicked fruit, and a rotten tree to yield good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then by their fruits you shall know them. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the reign of the heavens, but he who is doing the desire of my Father in the heavens. Many shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name and cast out demons in your name and done many mighty works in your name? And then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work lawlessness. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them shall be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain came down, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on the house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them shall be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain came down, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and they beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. That's the Sermon on the Mount. And then it says, and it came to be when Jesus had ended these words that the people were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one possessing authority and not as the scribes. What sticks out to you? So this is class participation. What sticks out to you after being seated in the context of a person hearing that for the first time? Having your kingdom totally destroyed? Can you? Oh yeah, that's super good. He was saying, can we run this around? I'd love to. I don't know if somebody can do it, but can you say that one more time, Alex, so that everyone can hear?
Thanks. I was saying that seeing it from the perspective of like having your nation overtaken so many times and like wanting it to be reestablished, seeing the Sermon on the Mount from the lens of building your life on the rock and doing the will of God and pursuing God as a way to preserve your life and your kingdom and like to not have it be overthrown.
Yeah.
Like, and seeing that through the lens of like they just want to be restored.
I've literally never, ever thought of that before, but that is super cool. Because like that part where it says, the rain came down, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on the house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. But then the next one is, and the rain came down, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and they beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. I mean, that sounds like a kingdom, like how you would talk about a kingdom, not like a house. So that's super interesting. Like in the mind of a person that's experienced that or has ancestors that have experienced that, that would probably be like I don't know. That would definitely get my attention if I was in that crowd. That's awesome, dude. Anyone else? Anything that stuck out to them? Sorry, and I don't know your name. What's your name?
Nick.
Nick.
Yep, I'm just visiting.
It's good to have you, man.
It's good to be here. The thing that stood out most to me was like when we were looking at the Roman and Greek mindsets of what the ideal character is, this is the exact antithesis to that.
Yeah.
Like he's describing a character that's dependent, that's meek, that's poor in spirit, has a moral like strength, but not outward take everything that you want strength.
Yeah.
It's not go and get, it's God will provide. It's the opposite. And so I was trying to imagine being Greek or Roman, and he's painting the picture of an ideal follower, disciple, and it's not at all what you've been taught an ideal disciple, an ideal man looks like.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Anybody else? I'm looking for like at least 4 or 5 more people. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Yeah.
Hey, I was thinking it maybe as like a Hasmodean, just thinking about how he's going to bring the kingdom back. And as you were reading, I was thinking about it in terms of, because I know enough about like the teachers, like they liked to teach in a way that would flip the page, you know.
Yeah.
But then flip it and teach some and then leave you with some kind of, hey, I got you, or something like that. And I think I would be waiting for him to, like he started, you know, in the Beatitudes, blessed are all the people who, what? You know, like
yeah.
You're waiting for him to flip that, but then he ends the Sermon on the Mount with, you know, the rain comes and everything crashes down. And so like I would almost feel like I would walk away more confused than anything.
Yeah.
Like, okay, wait, what do I do with this? But in a way that would make me want
Right.
to hear more, but not really have any idea what I just heard. You know, like a good movie, the good movies are the ones you're thinking about for days after. I think
Right.
that's where I would be with this. Like, okay, wait, that sounded significant, but I don't even know what to do with this yet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Anybody else? I saw that look. That's great. Over here, right there.
Yeah, I was kind of just thinking about how like the people were like wanting the foreign leaders out, and they were wanting the militaristic rule, and how Jesus talks about like I kind of got the parallel of the fasting when it's like, you know, when you put on a show and you want the reward, that's all you're gonna get is what you have, like that. But like when you're doing it for God, then your reward is in heaven. And kind of just the view of like they want the vengeance and they want that, but God's like, no, like come to me meek and your reward is in heaven.
Yeah. That's awesome. 2 more. Max.
The thing that stands out to me is there's a prominent feeling of conviction in everything. Like no matter what seat you're kind of in,
Yeah.
is the conquerors are like, oh, we're like, what we did isn't good. And then the people who were conquered were like, oh, if we, like, he's not meant to be the conqueror. And also, yeah, it just, even now, like, being seated back then and now, it's kind of it goes against the entire human condition. Like, every single point is like, you actually really shouldn't be like, you should be like this. And to me, it becomes overwhelming because it starts to sound like you should just be self-critical all the time. Like, and he literally says, be perfect like your father. And it's just, for someone to be saying that and then also be like, I am the way that you can be perfect when all of this is challenging you. That was what was like, wow, I probably need that guy, you know?
Yeah.
But
You like that part? I probably need that guy. Anyone? One more? Oh, Miss Maker. With the Montauk, New York shirt on. It's wild.
I just like the shirt.
Yeah.
For me, it was the model prayer because it illustrates how to pray rather than prescribing necessary words to use. Because I think Jesus was the one that described it as our Father, because beforehand the Jews didn't have that more personal connection in that sense. So I think it was like Jesus is having them draw them closer and using this model prayer as saying our Father and drawing them more closer together to him instead of keeping him at a far distance.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
yeah.
That's awesome. Sweet. Thank you so much for running around. Yeah, and I think, you know, we're gonna do some more work within the actual sermon. But I think this is why it's so good to really get the audience, right? Is I think a lot of times we read the Bible, especially in our mindset, and we're trying to pull principles out or just hear God speak to us in a moment, just us in particular. And it's like sometimes, like, when we can sit in the right seat, it stirs our heart in a totally different way. And so with that being said, I want to go over the sections of this and kind of break it down into our outline of this sermon. It's pretty short. I mean, it felt really long when I was reading it because I was reading it, and you guys were just listening to me. I keep threatening Maggie, my wife, that one day I'm gonna like memorize this and like preach it and just sit down afterwards and see what people do. I feel like people would be like, this sermon sucks. You know, like it's like 4 minutes long or 6 minutes long. But let's start with what we call the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes are named the Beatitudes because of a Latin word. It's beatus. These aren't the attitudes of how to be, which is what I thought they were for a very long time, maybe until like a week ago. But it's from a Latin word, beatus, meaning blessing. So these are the attitudes of blessing. And it's really, really important when we read the Bible, if Jesus is talking, this is just good friendly advice to you. If God is talking, maybe don't interrupt him. Right? Is that smart or what? I don't know, I'm a genius. So if God's talking, don't interrupt him. We do it all the time when we're reading the Bible. Ooh, that hurt, didn't it? Bible in a year, as all of a sudden we get to the middle of the Sermon on the Mount, and then we're like, good, cool. Well, just close that. I'll pick it up tomorrow. Think about how insane that is. Would you ever do that with a sermon? Like that's actually weird, right? Could you imagine? Like we don't even do that with podcasts most of the time, and they're talking about nonsense. You know, they're not even talking about stuff that's important. It's like aliens and UFOs, and we're like, oh, you know what? I don't want to pause it. Maybe I do have more lawn to mow. You know what I mean? But we do it all the time with Jesus. So we'll be reading in the middle of this, and we'll just be like, okay, cool. Like, I'll just pick it up tomorrow. This is meant to be read as a single segment, right? I would say that too, like probably almost any portion of scripture where someone's talking and you cut them off in the middle of dialogue, right? Like a prophet, and God's speaking to the prophet, and he's speaking for like a lot of chapters. Might be wise just to like know that and stack it up and set some time apart, rather than try and read it section by section and try to pick up on a conversation, you know, the next day. I feel like I have a fairly good memory, and I can't do that. I think if you can do that, you're amazing. We should talk afterwards. I'd love to know how you're gifted with that. But I would say for a majority of humans, we do not have the ability to close the Sermon on the Mount at chapter 5, pick it up in chapter 6, and then you tell me what happened in chapter 5 the day before. Okay? So I think that's a bad practice. I think part of it is Western laziness and the fact that we don't really read anymore. If you think about it, like, especially with literate populations. It was funny, we were reading The Lord of the Rings with Isaiah, who's back there. I think he's asleep. But I was reading, he's 9, you know, and I had to explain to him, because it's so detailed. I mean, the dude, he spends like 9 pages describing a field, you know, and you're just like, this has to end at some point, right? And we're sitting there, and he's like, why is this so boring? And I said, because no one had anything to do when this was written. There's no, you know, it's like, I'm trying to explain to him, like, it was written in like the 50s or the 40s. Like there were 3 channels, man. And if the president was on, like your night was shot. You know, it's like the flipper is not on. That only was funny to like 3 people. Flipper is a show about a dolphin that was a hero, kind of like Lassie. Anyway, so I was like trying to explain that to him, and I do think that's part of our generations. We're so used to being able to watch a TV show and to stream and all that kind of stuff that for some reason reading for 15 minutes now becomes like an arduous task, which is insane, right? If you think about the attention span of somebody living in this time period. And I'm just gonna give you really good advice if you're younger right now. If you have the attention span that's like longer than a peanut, you will do really well. Show up to things on time, look people in the eyes. Yeah, you guys are way behind on this one. Show up to things on time, look people in the eyes, and be able to read for 10 minutes, and you are smarter than everybody else around you. So I'm off my soapbox now, and we're back into the Sermon on the Mount. Okay, so our outline, we have the first part is the intro. And that's kingdom character, the Beatitudes, and then that ends with the influence of salt and light. So that's Matthew 5, 3 through 16. I think sometimes it's really good, like John Chrysostom, and there's a lot of early church fathers that actually spoke about the Beatitudes and did a lot of theology based around the Beatitudes. But if you think about it in terms of a sermon, this is almost like an attention getter, right? If you're standing in the crowd, first of all, if you see Jesus walk up a mountain and sit down and start teaching, you would think two things as a Jewish person. You would think, number one, that's what rabbis do, right? Is to sit down and start teaching. And number two, you would think Moses, right? It's remnant of Moses going up Mount Sinai. Matthew is gospel to the Jewish people. He's being set up as a new Moses, as the new David, as the new Adam, right? So that's really important for this book. So he's going up to this mountain, and then he's basically doing his version of the Ten Commandments, right? Not his version of the Ten Commandments, because we're continuing with the Ten Commandments, but his own spin. So he starts off, and I mean, can you imagine somebody just sitting, Isaiah, stop playing the drums when I'm talking. That's insane. I love you. You're amazing. Your hair looks good. Okay. Can you imagine somebody just being like, blessed are the poor in spirit, because theirs is the reign of the heavens. Blessed are those who mourn, because they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, because they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, because they shall be filled. Blessed are the compassionate, and on and on and on. This list is not blessed, right? If you're Jewish and you're waiting for our buddy Judas to come back and help us out, and we're thinking like, oh, dude, this guy, he's really cool. Everyone's been following him. We should check him out. I think he's probably gonna overthrow the Romans, do something super cool. And then he sits down and he's like, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. You'd be like, what? But I think this is something it would make you tune in, right? It would be offensive enough that you wouldn't. It's just offensive enough that it's like makes you think he's a weirdo, and not offensive enough to make you leave, right? That's the art of preaching. This is a super good crafted sermon. I like John Chrysostom. If you got John Chrysostom, who's an early Greek church father, he has a really good commentary on the Beatitudes that I would really suggest if you want to dive deeper into it. And he talks about them like they're a golden chain. So he says each Beatitude is arranged specifically to lead to the next one. So he was saying like the poor in spirit, so that those that are humble, right, they'll actually mourn their sin, because they'll understand where they're at in life. And then they'll be meek because of their humility and their understanding of sin. And then they'll hunger for righteousness in life, right? And so he's like showing how these things start to build off one another. And then it makes a chain out of the other side, where these people will now see all the results of the kingdom. They'll inherit the earth. They'll see God. And I love this part, because this really, what does this describe? A person that has some need, a person with some humility. And so Jesus is preaching his sermon on the kingdom, and he's saying, how do you see the kingdom? You gotta have a need. You gotta have humility, right? You can't come into the kingdom thinking you're awesome, or you're without need, or you're perfect, or by tithing your spices that gets you into the kingdom. Right? And so he's about to really tear down some cultural aspects, because he's saying, okay, only these people can see it, and now I'm about to create some descriptions of how you can see it. So he says, he talks about the salt and the light. So we have the fulfilling of the law, and he does 6 contrasts, raising righteousness to the heart level. So that's Matthew 5:17 through 48. And what we start to understand, who was it? Somebody said that this was, it wasn't the right word that I'm looking for, but it was like, that it was discouraging. Was that you, Max? Convicting? This is meant to be discouraging. Specifically, if you feel like you have any degree of holiness, right? So there was an oral tradition that was happening with the Pharisees that is now turned into what's called the Talmud. That was perfect timing. Talmud. So you can actually go read the Talmud. It's an actual book that you can buy. I have the Talmud. And so by this point, there are 36 laws for each law of Moses. So if you go to the Talmud and you go to the Sabbath, and then you go to working on the Sabbath, there's 15 pages in the Talmud on what work is defined as on the Sabbath. And it's as small, I mean, you know, Elliot knows all this stuff, but it's literally as small as like if you can sort things. If you can do this, you can sort these plastic spoons, but you can't sort the metal spoon. I mean, it's not that, you know, they don't have that in there, but it's that crazy. And so by this point in time, the Pharisees are taking an oral tradition that's not written down, and they're enforcing this on these people. And so the Sermon on the Mount, he's going, oh, cool, you want to be a Pharisee? Sounds good. Let's talk about the holiness of God compared to the holiness of the Pharisees. Oh, you don't commit adultery? If you look at a woman lustfully in your heart, you're less holy than God. Oh, you don't murder. That's great. Mr. Pharisee, you don't murder and you tithe your mint? That's amazing. If you get angry with your brother, you've already killed him in your heart and you do not achieve the holiness of God. This is what God is like. This is what God's kingdom is like. And what's supposed to be happening to these people is that their faces, if you're in this crowd, you're gonna start going, you would see people at the beginning go like, whoa, that's amazing, or ugh, this is stupid. Like, no, I don't want to. And then you'd see people, everybody, right? Whether they think it's stupid or amazing, you'd see this whole crowd start to collectively sink. Oh, that's what it's like. I can't do that. You know, like, that's impossible. How is that? You know? And so we get into this place where he's contrasting the following the law with having an understanding of God in your heart. He's contrasting the holiness of man and what man considers holy and what God considers holy. Okay, and then we get into kingdom practices, secret giving, prayer. We get into the Lord's Prayer and fasting. Matthew 6, 1 through 18. 6, 1 through 18. And what's really fun about that is if you just take hypocrite and you take the word Pharisee, they are interchangeable in this sentence. If you take the word hypocrite and you take the word Sadducee, they're interchangeable in this sentence. If you take the word hypocrite and you put zealot in here, if you take hypocrite and you put Essene, who separated themselves off from society and are just waiting for the coming kingdom out in the desert, if you take any of them, any of these now religious political parties, and you substitute their names into this, they all become hypocrites, right? And so these people, these are common people for the most part. And they're experiencing this radical thing where it goes like, oh, that's amazing. Probably, if you're Jewish, you're like, well, you know, I'm sitting here and I have nothing to do on this day, right? So, you know, it's like probably not economically viable at this point. And then you have this moment where it's like, whoa, I totally suck. If you put me up next to God, I'm not righteous at all. And then he goes into their religious group, and not even the Pharisees are righteous. Oh, I know Pharisees that do that. Oh, I've been in Jerusalem when that dude prayed on a street corner. I've been in the temple, you know, celebrating, you know, Passover when a Pharisee took all his money and like would give. And they even had, this is crazy, at this point in time, they even had things where you had to take care of the poor and you had to take care of your parents if they were elderly. And what people would do is they would give their money into the temple. This is nuts, guys, especially religious leaders. They love to do this. They would give their money into the temple. The temple would hold on to it until their parents died and give it back to them so that they didn't have to take care of their parents and use their money to take care of their families. That's our religious leaders at the time. Isn't that insane? Yeah, dude, look at that face. That's the face you should be making. You know what's crazy though? So Missy just made this face like she was absolutely disgusted by that. And you should be. The problem at the time is these are the heroes of this population, right? These are the religious leaders. These are the political leaders. We're all in a faction with somebody. right? We all hate the Romans for the most part, and we're all in a faction with somebody, right? That's who we are because we're in the crowd, right? Okay, so next we go from that to, these secret giving, the prayer, and maybe some of these people start going like, wait, I do that. How cool would that be? I pray in my room, like they might start feeling a little bit better about themselves. And then Jesus goes into the fourth part of this sermon, and that's kingdom priorities, right? So we have these priorities. And think about this. I'm waiting for Judas Maccabeus to come. And instead, I get these kingdom priorities, which is heavenly treasures. Don't store up your treasures here. What's crazy is when the Hasmoneans get like taken over, they take a lot of the nice stuff out of the temple. So there's, and then before the Maccabean revolt, they take nice stuff out of the temple, right? Every time Israel gets taken over, they're like, every time Israel gets taken over, they're like, let's take all the good stuff out of here, okay? And so when the Seleucids take over, they take a bunch of the nice stuff out of the temple, right? And so this is Jesus probably speaking into that. Don't store your treasures up here. Like Hurricane, these guys can just come and take it away. Pompey the Great can come and take it away, right? But they can't take it away from heaven. Undivided service. You can't serve two masters. This is going to be really funny when it gets into the Roman and Greek world, right? Because they always serve two masters. At least they've got 4, 6, 8. They go into a new place and they make sacrifices to the gods in that area. They see the gods mostly as regional. So this is going to be a huge message to the Greek and Roman world. And then this message of trust over anxiety. You don't have to provide a way for yourself. You don't have to always know the next step. Actually, sometimes believing you know the next step is detrimental to your life. And Jesus, trust him. There's flowers that look great. They look better than Solomon. Solomon was like a legend at this point, right? So it's like these flowers look better than Solomon, and he'll take care of you, right? The next thing is we have relationships and discernment. So non-judging, asking God. We have the golden rule, the narrow gate, and testing prophets. So all this stuff, again, it's going to be very, very countercultural. Judge not lest you be judged. Guess what they're doing all the time? Judging the Romans, if they're in the Pharisee camp, they judge the Sadducees. And it literally says, if you judge people with this measure, that's how you're going to be judged when you get to heaven, right? So that's, again, I think sinking. This is terrible. Treat others how you want to be treated. The gate to get into heaven, to be part of this kingdom, is really narrow. That would make a lot of sense to these people because they live in city gates, right? This is kind of a weird thing for us because we don't really picture heaven as a kingdom. We do, right? Because if I say the kingdom of heaven, you're like, yeah, but we don't see like when I say kingdom of heaven, you see like probably, baby angels and clouds and stuff like that. You don't see a castle and a wall and a gate, right? Does anyone see that when I say heaven? Kingdom of heaven, a little bit. But, that's these people, Isaiah's like, I do. But these people, if you say kingdom of heaven, that's what they see. They see a kingdom. Every kingdom they've ever seen has a castle, has a wall, has a gate. And he's like, hey, this gate is narrow, guys. It's hard to get into this place. And then the last thing in the outline is we have the two builders. So we have the rock foundation and we have the sand foundation. What does this sound like too? If we have another parable from Jesus. Maybe like the sower and the seed, right? We have a lot of other areas where Jesus takes this and gives it in a different way. Right? What are you going to build your house on? What are you gonna, how are you gonna plant seeds? How are you gonna harvest, right? Like there's all these things of like, what do you build on? What do you build your life on? And he's talking about the kingdom of heaven. I was trying to think of which angle I want to approach this at for our last little bit. Before I go, any questions here? Cool. Feels good. I want to jump over to Luke real quick, and you guys can open there. And this is the Sermon on the Plain. So Luke 6. One second, let me grab it here. I want it in better language. Sorry, just tuning to it. Great. It's perfect time for the internet not to work. Oh, there we go. Luke 6:20 through 49. All right. We're doing great, guys. 17. Luke 6:17 is where it starts. And he came down with them and stood on a level place, and a large crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all of Judea and Jerusalem and the seacoast district of Tyre and Sidon, who came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases, and those who were troubled by unclean spirits were cured. And the whole crowd was seeking to touch him, because the power was going out from him and healing them all. He lifted up his eyes to his disciples and said, "Blessed are the poor." So, come on, buddy. Blessed are the poor. So the big difference here automatically is, what do we not see? The poor in spirit, right? Blessed are the poor, because yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are those who are hungry now, because you will be satisfied. Blessed are those who weep now, because you will laugh. Blessed are those when people hate you, and when they exclude you and revile you and spurn your name as evil on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, for behold, your reward is great in heaven. So what's interesting about this is that he is speaking primarily to an audience made up of Jews and Gentiles, right? Because we get this region of Tyre and Sidon. And it's really cool that Luke includes this in his book, right? Because he's going to be speaking to a more specific group of Roman and Gentile people. So why do you think he would say, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God," instead of poor in spirit? Any guesses? Any brave guesses from Max? No, it wasn't wealth, but it was a good effort. It was a really good effort. I liked it. Yeah. I can't be mean to you, because then no one else will answer questions. But I would like to be mean to you. Okay, next time. Matthew, what do you think? So why would he say, "Blessed are you who are poor," instead of "poor in spirit" for this one? If you're speaking to a primarily mixed audience of Jewish people and Greek Romans, basically Greco-Romans, Tyre and Sidon. Yeah, they look down on the poor. That's excellent. They actually would not have a concept of poor in spirit. So if you said to a Roman or a Greek, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," they would be like, "Who are they?" But they knew who poor people were. So they were good with that. And that would make them very upset. This would also make Jewish people very upset. Because remember, a lot of the issue with Judaism, what happens when we have the man who's blind? What do the disciples ask? who sinned? Was it him or his mom and dad, right? And so that was really like the way of like, hey, these are people living in the consequences of their actions. So when Jesus starts to flip this narrative and go, no, hey, dude. And this is like a whole nother thing, right? Poor in spirit, yeah, that's humble, all that kind of stuff. This is like, hey, if you're poor, you're blessed because you actually need something from me. And you know it, right? If you're hungry, he's not saying hunger and thirst for righteousness. If you are hungry, if you need food, I'm the perfect person for you. Blessed are you who weep now, for you shall laugh, right? It's very plain language that we love Luke for this reason. If you ever have a friend that needs to start reading the Bible, start him in Mark or Luke. If you start him in John or Matthew, you're a bad friend. And also you should be reading it with them. John is not organized. And we love him for that, yes. There would probably be fewer people that were fully familiar with the Pharisees in this setting, especially in a mixed crowd. Like Tyre and Sidon, if you're up north, these guys would have been under Seleucid rule for a very long time. So there'd be probably not a whole lot of familiarity, in my opinion, with the political system in Israel. I would say a better word would be the hypocritical people. Jesus' real message is everyone's kind of an oppressor, right? It's like you have a bunch of people who believe they're victims of something happening in the first setting, and he's basically like, this is what holiness looks like. Do you guys think you deserve a kingdom? Is how I take it. And the answer is no, right? And then he does the same thing here, and the people probably would answer no. And the cool thing about the Sermon on the Mount is, again, I think personally, it's made to make you feel kind of hopeless until you read the rest of the book. Because the rest of Matthew, the next several chapters, he goes and demonstrates the kingdom. Because we don't actually get the secret in this, right? Like Max gave us the secret because he knows the end of the book. And he's like, it's nice because like it makes you know that Jesus is the one that makes you perfect. He never says that in this. And they're all like, cool. It's like build my house upon the rock. And then he's like, let's go heal some people, And so I think that's a cool thing. So if you read the book of Matthew, it's really structured of like, we have the origin story of Jesus. Then we have the Sermon on the Mount, right, as his start to ministry. And then after that, we have the demonstration of the kingdom. And so he goes out, heals the sick. Then we have all these really cool individualistic stories culminating in the crucifixion, the resurrection. And so we find out the secret later in the book, obviously with a ton of Levitical and Old Testament law, prophecy, all that kind of stuff mixed in because it's the gospel to the Jewish people. So that's really good. And actually a lot of the Beatitudes, I didn't even get to this part because we're going to be wrapping up, but a lot of the Beatitudes, and then also when he says, but you hear it said, are pulled directly from Old Testament text. So, so I think what's really cool about this and what we have to remember, so one, I think big key takeaways, obviously we're talking about the Sermon on the Mount, but I always want to get back to, if you're in more of these, you'll always hear me say the same thing. Good hermeneutics is putting yourself in the seat of the audience. And, as we do that, I would really encourage you, if you're going to be reading Matthew, like we're doing the Beatitudes this month for our focus and preaching and that kind of stuff that I hope you see. But I think what would be really cool is to read through Matthew with that mindset of, hey, let's look at this from the spot of, especially having that Maccabean revolt and the Hasmonean and nostalgia is just history with a couple drinks involved, right? Because it's really, we have these people that are wanting something that was probably never good. and they're wanting God. I just think the great irony is they're wanting God to be Judas Maccabeus. And isn't there something really ironic and poetic about the fact that he's betrayed by a Judas who most likely betrayed him because he wanted to see what happened in the Maccabean revolt happen again? Just like a crazy, isn't that nuts? I think reading with that mindset and seeing like, hey, what is the, because even the reader of this book, like a Jewish person, this was like their track. If you guys ever saw tracks, we don't have those anymore. But people used to go to the beach in the Jesus movement and like hand out papers of comic books. And people would like read them. It was pretty cool. It's like now no one has an attention span long enough to do it, but they made them like comic books. So they were like, hey, it's Spider-Man Jesus. But it's like, this was like a track. This was an evangelistic tool for Jewish people. That's why Matthew writes this book, is he wants to put it in the hands of Jewish people and say like, the Messiah that you've been wanting is not Judas Maccabeus, it's not Bar Kokhba later on, it's not all these historical figures that you're wanting, it's Jesus of Nazareth. And it's all right here, it's all fulfilled here. So, super cool. Any questions as we leave? I know it's like, this was a little bit more of I had to read and stuff, so a little bit more low energy for me, but and all serious topics. But if you guys, usually we have a Q&A part, but I don't know if there are. Yes. Yeah, so you're saying when he was talking about people being poor are blessed, would a Roman hear that and feel like that was directly in opposition to their way of life? Is that correct? So yeah, I think any of the groups would hear that. No one wants to be poor, right? Am I correct? Like if I said, hey, by a show of hands, who wants to be poor, right? Like no one would raise their hand in here. A lot of us would be willing to be poor, right? I'm totally willing to be poor. Like me and Isaiah were even having this conversation where when people used to be baptized, they would say like, hey, are you willing to die if someone asks you to recant your faith? That was like a baptism question. Probably should bring it back. But we were talking about that, and we were like literally looking up how many people were martyred and stuff like that. So it's like, and I told him like, hey, that's what I signed up for. But if again, by a show of hands, if I said, who wants to die? Not a lot of us, right? And if somebody raised their hand, we'd be like, we'll pray for you. So it's not something where it's like a value. It's something where it was just an obvious thing. And so I think for anybody in that culture to hear that a poor person was blessed, even for the poor person, they would probably be like, did I hear that right? There's this movie that no one should ever watch, but like it's funny. It's called Life of Brian. And they're standing in the Sermon on the Mount, and they hear like, blessed are the meek. And he goes, what, did he say blessed are the Greek? And they're like kind of butchering this whole sermon, and they're hearing it from really far away. And I just think like probably most people would like to do that instead, like blessed are the poor. Like if we're Christians, we'd be like, is the Greek word for poor like wealthy or something? Blessed are those with lots and lots of dollars. But I think it really just comes back to the fact that it is offensive, but at the core of the idea is it's blessed are people with need, with humility, with, respect for their own humanity, understanding that we're limited, getting the fact that, it's why the Pharisees were so hard to work with. It wasn't because they were terrible people. It was because they'd trained themselves to be blind to their own sin. And I think if we're being really honest, there's a lot of Pharisaical Christianity right now. There's a lot of us that have been trained to be blind to our own sin. I think it really happens. I think we should all participate in politics. Like, just personally, I'm like, hey, if we don't vote for godly people to be in government, we'll have a bunch of godless, awful people in government. So I would just prefer the first one over the second one. But I do think there's an element when I see Christians get like super duper involved in the political sphere, you get a lot of like very pharisaical Christians. And I'm like, man, I forgot the part where you were perfect. But I think that's true like in a lot of movements. I think anytime you get involved in something that starts to supersede your affiliation with Jesus, then you stop seeing your need for him. So I think it's a good cautionary thing for all of us to be careful of. Like, we all need to be poor in spirit in a way of, we all need to understand in our humility, like, I suck by myself. Like, I did drugs, I like those instead. And God totally like saved me. I have a family. I have all everything I have in my life is because Jesus gave his life for me and because the Holy Spirit lives inside of me. It's not because I'm great. And so, but I think it's really easy. Well, I'm like 20 years into being a Christian, 30, 40, 50 years in, all of a sudden it can get easier to start going like, people are pretty terrible, and I'm pretty great. And so I think this is what reminds us of that. I also think it's funny that a lot of times the things we find really annoying about other people are usually things that we have victory over, but that we struggle with. So it's funny, Max asked a question during our staff meeting, and I don't know if you remember it, but he was like, how do you deal with people that like continually, you see the potential in them, but they continue to like fail over and over again? And I literally thought, man, like everyone I see that I get like super frustrated with is because I used to be that way and I'm not that way anymore, and they annoy me. Isn't that funny? But then the Sermon on the Mount's like, yeah, you can't do that. So that's a really long answer to a really good question. Don't know if the answer was good. Any other one? We got time for like one more, and then we'll be done. But I want one more. Okay, no more. Okay, I'm gonna pray. We'll be done for the night. Lord, we just thank you for your word. We thank you for your words here in this sermon, and that we're part of a kingdom that looks so unique compared to what we would create. I just think that's such a mark of your goodness and your kindness, and the fact that you're God and we are bad at it. And so we thank you for your kingdom. We thank you for getting to be a part of it. And I pray that we would each continue in humility and need, seeing your kindness and your goodness throughout our lives and seeing your miraculous hand over us. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, guys.